and welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today, Jon Uhler sits down with Ed Sparrius to discuss the Free to Change study.
Perfect transition to, we can talk about the emotional states, and Brad, those were excellent questions. And really it hits at the heart of this quote unquote anti-conversion therapy legislation that's being rammed through parliaments and legislatures, that if somebody, regardless of adult or young person, if they don't have the ability to sit down with someone and to process this, as I've mentioned, there are 9 red flag, key red flag indicators of sexual abuse. Yet if those are now reframed in terms of gender and gender confusion and indicators that they are trans, then we really have limited the help. We've failed as mandated reporters, quite frankly, and we haven't helped someone be able to explore. So this legislation limits freedom. So the people are not free to change, they're not free to reconsider, and they're not free to explore, and they better not have a therapist that's going to help them do that.
I don't know if you guys have seen the Reddit, the trans site. That now has around about, I think it's 50 to 60,000 members, and many of them are kids who over the last years got involved in living transgender lives and now want out of those lives. And their stories on there are absolutely horrific. Some of those kids, it was just a bit of a fad. Some of them have lived a long life and had sexual surgeries and all sorts of things, but it is a huge number that we now have trying to get back out of that lifestyle. And we're being told, oh no, these people it's innate, they don't really want to change. But here we have just one of a number of social websites that is actually showing tens of thousands of kids, or young adults now, who's saying we've made a horrendous mistake and we've destroyed our lives, we've damaged ourselves. We're sexually incompetent. We're on hormones that we can't ever get off. We're sterile, and this just goes on and on and on, and it's going to be a lot worse because so many kids around the world are getting involved.
Woman in Ontario who identified as transgender and underwent hormone therapy, a bilateral mastectomy, and a hysterectomy filed the first lawsuit in Canada against her healthcare providers for facilitating her transition. This is 8 doctors and mental health professionals who treated her over the years. She alleges that they failed to address her complex mental health needs. You think? And instead allowed her to self-diagnose as transgender and undergo these irreversible procedures that she now regrets. Watch.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a detransitioned woman, and I am pursuing legal action against the health professionals that facilitated my medical transition. I began identifying as transgender in young adulthood with no dysphoria beforehand. This was not a red flag to me, as I was assured that many people discover their true gender identity later in life. Less than a year after coming out to myself, I was prescribed synthetic testosterone, which permanently virilized my voice and appearance. I had a bilateral mastectomy 14 months later, and finally, 8 years into my transition, I had a medically unnecessary hysterectomy covered by the Ontario Health Insurance Plan. Each step involved irreversible alterations to my body and came with serious risks, yet all were met with little challenge despite my long-standing history of mental health struggles and no indication of gender-related distress in childhood or adolescence. I am alleging that this lack of inquiry is a failure of due diligence amounting to medical negligence towards a vulnerable patient.
But after 24 years working with the Tavistock, Dr. Bell, a former president of the British Psychoanalytic Society, has recently retired. And in his first television interview since then, he began by outlining his worries about the service.
The main concerns were issues to do with lack of consent. Many of the people who spoke to me did not think the children were able to consent to the treatment. Then there were concerns of children being inappropriately pushed through to transition, whereas they had a lot of complex problems. As a result, children have been very seriously damaged.
I was basically put on different kinds of medications from age 12. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed with an eating disorder and depression and anxiety, like I already said. But none of the medications that I was put on ever really seemed to help me very much. I really just struggled, and especially with a bipolar medication that was really intense. They were having me put on antipsychotics from age 12. I took those for about 2 years. So I took most of my medications until I was 15, and then I stopped taking them around age 14, 15, and when I came out as trans, I was on no medications, which was definitely a problem that should have been addressed before anything else was done, except it wasn't. I wasn't put on any medications. I wasn't put on a pill for depression. I wasn't put on anything for anxiety. I had no medication. I didn't want medication. All I wanted was the testosterone because I thought this is going to solve all my problems.
The whole attitude of what's called affirmation instead of neutrality and inquiry caused considerable damage to the capacity of the service and clinicians to take on the full complexities of the cases they were dealing with. As a result, children have been very seriously damaged.
I masked a lot of what I was really feeling, and I used being trans as a way to deal with all of the things that I was feeling. Looking back, hindsight is 2020. Of course, I wish someone would have said to me, stop. Which, of course, I was a child, and I could have, things could have ended up differently if, but there's no point in saying, what if? I was also very obsessed, I was obsessive. And I feel like there were many red flags.
There were all these red flags, and I honestly wish that somebody had pointed them out to me, and then I might not have transitioned in the first place. If I had realized that, somebody with a history of an eating disorder, a history of childhood sexual abuse, a history of, neglect and bullying for being a gender non-conforming female, a person with internalized homophobia and misogyny should not have been encouraged to transition, as if these things could be solved by becoming a man. And I wish that somebody had sort of tried to stop me.
By putting on that pathway, it rather becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
After that, I was like, okay, maybe I'm non-binary. And then I thought more about it, and I obsessed over it for months. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm trans. I think that I'm a trans guy. And when I thought that, I physically felt a weight lift off my shoulders.
The children have been diagnosed now as their main problem being gender. The other problems are left aside. And this results, in my view, in many children having inappropriate medical treatment. Children of that age, say 10, 12, 13, 14, can they really, and given that they're very disturbed at the time, are they really in a position to to weigh up and understand what the implications for them are? What they want is something done now. I want to change now.
And I thought, oh my God, this is the answer to all of my problems. This is it. And that's what I told my therapist. That's what I told anyone who asked me. I came out to everyone immediately once I realized that I was a trans guy. I was like, everyone has to know right now about how good this feels, about how this is me. This is the real me. And once I had that seed planted in my head, there was no getting it out. There was no taking it back.
35 to 40% of these children are on the autistic spectrum. Large number of them have been exposed to major trauma. Large number have very serious family problems.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a detransitioner. Another way to put that would be, I used to believe that I was born in the wrong body, and the adults in my life whom I trusted affirmed my belief, and this caused me lifelong, irreversible harm. I speak to you today as a victim of one of the biggest medical scandals in the history of the United States of America. I speak to you in the hope that you will have the courage to bring the scandal to an end and ensure that other vulnerable teenagers, children, and young adults don't go through what I went through. At the age of 12, I began to experience what my medical team would later diagnose as gender dysphoria. I was well into an early puberty, and I was very uncomfortable with the changes that were happening to my body. I was intimidated by male attention, and when I told my parents that I felt like a boy, in retrospect, all I meant was that I hated puberty, that I wanted this newfound sexual attention to go away, that I looked up to my brothers a little bit more than I did to my sisters. I came out as transgender in a letter I sent on the dining room table. My parents were immediately concerned. They felt like they needed to get outside help from medical professionals, but this proved to be a mistake. It immediately set our entire family down a path of ideologically motivated deceit and coercion. The gender specialist I was taken to see told my parents that I needed to be put on puberty-blocking drugs right away. They asked my parents a simple question: would you rather have a dead daughter or a living transgender son? The choice was enough for my parents to let their guard down, and in retrospect, I can't blame them. This was the moment that we all became victims of so-called gender-affirming care. I was fast-tracked onto puberty blockers and then testosterone. The resulting menopausal-like hot flashes made focusing on school impossible. I still get joint pains and weird pops in my back, but they were far worse when I was on the blockers. A month later, when I was 13, I had my first testosterone injection. It's caused permanent changes to my body. My voice will forever be deeper, my jawline sharper, my nose longer, my bone structure permanently masculinized, my Adam's apple more prominent, my fertility unknown. I look in the mirror sometimes and I feel like a monster. I had a double mastectomy at 15. They tested my amputated breast for cancer. And I was cancer-free, of course. I was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with my still developing body or my breasts, other than that, as an insecure teenage girl, I felt awkward about it. After my breasts were taken away from me, the tissue was incinerated. Before I was able to legally drive, I had a huge part of my future womanhood taken from me. I will never be able to breastfeed. I struggle to look at myself in the mirror at times. I still struggle to this day with sexual dysfunction. And I have massive scars across my chest. And the skin grafts that they took of my nipples are weeping fluid today. And they were grafted into a more masculine positioning, they said. After surgery, my grades in school plummeted. Everything that I went through did nothing to address my underlying mental health issues that I had. And my doctors, with their theories on gender, thought that all my problems would go away as soon as I was surgically transformed into something that vaguely resembled a boy. Their theories were wrong. The drugs and surgeries changed my body, but they did not and could not change the basic reality that I am and forever will be a female. When my specialist first told my parents that they could have a dead daughter or a live transgender son, I wasn't suicidal. I was a happy child who struggled because she was different. However, at 16, after my surgery, I did become suicidal. I'm doing better now, but my parents almost got the dead daughter promised to them by my doctors. My doctors had almost created the very nightmare they said they were trying to avoid. So what message do I want to bring to American teenagers and their families? I didn't need to be lied to. I needed compassion. I needed to be loved. I needed to be given therapy to help me work through my issues, not affirm to my delusion that by transforming into a boy, it would solve all my problems. We need to stop telling 12-year-olds that they were born wrong, that they are right to reject their own bodies and feel uncomfortable with their own skin. We need to stop telling children that puberty is an option, that they can choose what kind of puberty they will go through, just so they can choose what clothes to wear or what music to listen to. Puberty is a rite of passage to adulthood, not a disease to be mitigated. Today, I should be at home with my family celebrating my 19th birthday, and instead I'm making a desperate plea to my elected representatives. Learn the lessons from other medical scandals like the opioid crisis, to recognize that doctors are human too, and sometimes they are wrong. My childhood was ruined along with thousands of detransitioners that I know through our networks. This needs to stop. You alone can stop it. Enough children have already been victimized by this barbaric pseudoscience. Please let me be your final warning. Thank you.
Because I have non-functioning genitals. I cannot have sex. I cannot reproduce. At all. And it's terrifying. And I don't even know how to cope with that. I'm trying to figure that out. Like, I'm really trying to figure it out. And it's hard because not a lot of people are willing to talk about this. And I think that's what's inspired me to do this, is because this is a real thing. And this is a real thing people go through. But they're silent because of shame. I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed. And so I'm telling the story because I want to speak out against these procedures. These doctors are not being honest. These doctors are not being truthful in what they can do. They were literally telling me to my face that it would be completely normal. Like, it would be a completely normal genital. And it was very much not. Nothing even close to it. Like, now I literally have nothing. Like, I don't even consider it a genital. It's not really one. Because of this procedure, I now have zero sex drive. I do not want to have sex. And I have no desire to. And that scares me because that's a huge part of being a human being. That's a real part of being a person and being in a relationship. And it's okay to say that. It's not that that's all a relationship is, or that's all being a person is, but it's a part of it. It's an important part of it. And to act like it's not is a lie, because it's an important thing to me. I'm saying this because I want answers, and I'm going to get them somehow. I want justice for what happened to me, because I was completely abandoned after this happened. I was left by myself. I remember when I had the vaginoscopy done and they basically told me I have no genitals. I sat in that hospital room and I cried while the surgeon walked out. He just walked out. He was like, "We'll give you a minute." While I sat there, so young, with the news that I don't have a functioning genital system. I don't have an organ that functions properly and is a really important one. I was just sold a promise. I was sold a dream of something that is not real. And I see so much these days that people are trying to act like it is, and it's not. It's not. It's not real. These things are not safe like they want to act like it is. These things are not miracles like they act like they are. They're not easy like they want to act like they are. This shit is so dangerous. The big elephant in the room is that I don't have a genital that works. And I'm scared of my future. And how can I have a partner? How can I be with someone? How can I have a family when I'm missing a very key component of that? And it's terrifying.
Here in Australia, they're just now, our Plastic Surgery Society, the doctors, they now want to be able, on our Medicare system, be able to carry out sexual reassignment surgeries. And they're estimating 50,000 young people are waiting for surgeries just in our country. So we've only got 27 million people here. But that's just now. And this is after pushing this stuff in schools for 10 years. What's going to come down the track? We have no idea if this isn't stopped.
Sorry,
I think sorry.
Yeah, 50,000 are on that Reddit detransition. Anybody can go on there. That's just the detransitioner part of Reddit. I'm not up on Reddit. I forget the term, but it's that section. You just type that in, detransitioner, on Reddit, and you'll see it, the group. But 50,000, I think it's only been in existence 6 or 7 years. So
not very long at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sexual abuse prior to joining the lifestyle, and then joining the lifestyle to continue being sexually abused. How does that make sense?
Right? That's why this is a predator's, talk about a racket.
Yeah.
Right? That it's like the Hotel California. If anybody knows that song, you can check in anytime you like, but just can't ever leave. That's a cult. And cults hate, first of all, cults toy with language, so that's why they won't use accurate terms. They'll say top surgery, bottom surgery, instead of double mastectomy and castration or oophorectomy for women. They won't ever mention about sterilization. They won't mention the word sex change, right? So they are deceptive, and just like a cult, they're going to push people away and say, these are our kids. There's even a term, new glitter family, right? I've seen plenty of videos out there where athletes that are these guys that are dressed in drag say, you know what, if you feel like your parents don't care enough, we do. We could be your new glitter family. Well, that's cult. That is cult speak. That is cult dynamics. And what do cults say? Once we have them, they are our kids. And so that's why they're using this term anti-conversion therapy, because the cult leader, the manipulator, the perpetrator, the predator is saying they're mine. And if you try to peel that perpetrator's hands away, meaning get rid of the influence that has caused that young person, because the young person doesn't know they're being exploited. You can be exploited and not know it. So all these young kids are being exploited either financially or sexually. I mean, who's got skin in the game? It's these kids. And so it's the pushers of this that want to make sure that these kids never leave their influence, the influence of the perpetrator, predator, manipulator, leave their influence or grasp. And so they've come up with this term that if the child begins to distance themselves, that somebody has converted them. So they've toyed with the language. So these kids are troubled kids. They already have, in the vast majority of them, are on the autism spectrum and have been sexually violated in one way or another. And now pornography is introduced. Now you've really screwed their minds up. And so, Ed, let's talk about what the study saw in terms of mental health, because what we hear is these kids are going to kill themselves unless they can get their breast chopped off or get castrated. And the reality is there's some serious mental health issues in alternative lifestyles, and maybe that's what makes people susceptible. And my contention is that is what makes people susceptible to being unduly influenced.
My name is Morgan. I am the Ohio detransitioner that Prisha warned you about. I'm 26 years old and was trans-identified for 5 years. In March of this year, after trying to ignore the doubt and regret that began to build around my transition, I woke up one morning with the realization that my trans identity was never about becoming my most genuine self or living my life authentically. Instead, it was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to become someone else, to escape my unidentified trauma and body and mental health issues.
Yeah, well, very much, we keep getting told that if these kids can't transition, they're going to suicide. Yet in this particular group who left the lifestyle, and we had about 10 transgenders in that group out of the 78. So the suicidal ideation, 75.6% said that their suicidal ideation had dropped by 39%. So that was a considerable number. The anxiety, nearly 94% said their anxiety had gone down nearly 50% of what it was before they left their LGBT lifestyles.
So the charts, the charts that we're looking at, the one on the top is before, the below is.
So now what the one on the top is, it shows how many people reported an improvement in a particular area. So in the very top chart, if you look at suicidal ideation, 75.6%, so what's that, 59 of the people said that their suicidal ideation decreased. And if you go to the second chart, it says by how much. So by 39%. Yeah.
That's the improvement on the top there, that all those things got better. Yeah.
The thing that you want to look at as well is self-image. How many of them actually said their self-image improved? And that was, 75.4%, but it improved by 50%. That's a big jump about how people felt about themselves. And you can go and read through all those as to how it went. Physical health was the one that was the least improved, but I guess that's not surprising with our society. Promiscuity, there was also quite a change in promiscuity. And a little bit of a thing on this, when we say, 75% of people said their suicidal ideation improved or decreased, it didn't mean that the other 25, there was no decrease. It simply meant the other 25 didn't have any suicidal ideation, or that was the general understanding of what we got out of the results. But overall, these people's lifestyles improved dramatically, and these charts show exactly that. That's what we were looking for, to see if that was the case. And right from the very start, when we started getting the first numbers coming in, these figures here didn't change. So they varied a little bit back and forth, but they were just so consistent that it was just really surprising as we were getting more and more people coming in that they stayed so consistent.
And there's another chart. I'm sorry, showing that improvement. So there's another chart.
Yeah. And all this stuff is both in the study, and you can also download these charts individually if you want to. There's another web page on there, or page on the website, that gives you the raw data that we looked up. So we were trying to be totally transparent with what we did. Didn't want to hide anything. If we had bad results, we were going to put them up, but we didn't. We just had terrific results with this group of people. We also were very careful that we vetted all of them. We had a number of people try to sneak in and give us dodgy statistics. What we did was we linked through a whole lot of LGBT groups and also pastors of churches and other people that we knew we could trust, and said, okay, this person has come to us. They put this information on the website. Do you know them? Can you vouch for them? And if we couldn't get someone to vouch for them, then we'd contact them and say, look, you need to get someone that we can talk to vouch your story. If that didn't happen, then we didn't use their information. And there was a number of times that happened. It wasn't very many, but it certainly was there. We just wanted to make 100% sure that the people we were interviewing and getting statistics from were reliable, and that we could use, and know that down the track they weren't going to turn around and say, well, we lied and they used our statistics. So that works very well for us. And the ex-LGBT groups around the world helped us with that.
Well, what you just shared was important. What you shared was important because you are really then managing the quality, the validity, the reliability of the outcomes. Unlike, for instance, Sam Brinton, who had a very elaborate story. He's the female luggage stealing, or he's the guy that stole female luggage at 3 separate airports that we know of. It's probably more.
At all. I went up to my dad and I said, Dad, and of course telling on the others because I was so wonderful and it didn't hurt me. And telling them, I said, but it's really weird. I didn't get the same feelings. I said, I have those feelings when I think of Dale, my best friend. My dad just started punching. That was the first day that I was sent to the emergency room because I'd fallen down the stairs.
Morning, everyone. Well, we're starting off with an interesting topic, and we're going to talk about how to detect deception because this is rampant across the universe, especially when she was just talking about language that people use. So at the Human Behavior Lab, I analyze whether a person is being truthful or not. So oftentimes I'm hired by attorneys to evaluate videotape depositions and statements. Could be a 911 call, all of that. Anything to do with voice, words, and language, we analyze at the Human Behavior Lab.
I was sent to the emergency room about 6 more times for falling down the stairs or tripping on the sidewalk. I'm in this constant state of fear. My mom finally starts recognizing, you know what? Hitting him might not be working. So let's try therapy. And it started with the first few weeks. I had AIDS. I was the only gay person left in the world because the government found all the other gays and killed them as children. If they found me, they would kill me.
I've been doing this now since 2004. I've appeared in over 1,500 national TV shows. I'm one of Dr. Phil's experts. So I analyze video. I analyze suspects and witnesses in high-profile cases A lot of you may have heard about the Michael Jackson case that happened with the two guys that alleged that they were sexually molested by Michael. I also worked on the Jeffrey Epstein case and many, many, many more. So kind of just give you a little heads up, I'm the real deal. So anyway, so the Human Behavior Lab, I have 3 people that work with me, 2 other who are former police officers. One does statement analysis and one does voice stress analysis. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a gentleman who I'd heard about in the circles that we've been in, about a gentleman called Sam Brinton. Anyone heard of Sam Brinton?
The perfect way to keep a child or a teen from coming out. And we moved on to physical therapy. Physical therapy was my hands being tied down and blocks of ice being placed on my hands. Then pictures of men holding hands would be shown to me, so that way I would associate the concept of the pain of ice with a man touching me. It worked really, really, really well. My dad could barely even hug me anymore when I would scream out in pain.
Some have, some may have not. Well, he is the LGBTQ darling. I mean, he's been in front of Congress. He has spoken at multiple events. He has become a platform speaker, keynote speaker on the topic of conversion therapy. So he was the one that kind of brought it to light about that he was tortured to convert to being non-gay.
Then we went into heat. So coils would be wrapped around my hands and you would be able to turn the heat on or off. So now if we had a picture of a guy and a girl hugging, it was no pain. If there was a picture of a guy and a guy hugging, we had physical pain.
So he tells you his story. And when I've been in my travels, I've heard of this guy, and I said to our team, I go, does he have videos? I mean, obviously there's got to be videos of him out there. So sure enough, there were. So we collected all these YouTube videos and where he had spoken at multiple events, and we got our team to work on it.
We then went into the month of hell. The month of hell consisted of tiny needles being stuck into my fingers, and then pictures of explicit acts between men would be shown, and I'd be electrocuted.
When I'm doing a 3-pronged study, I'm evaluating them separately from my other team members. So with that being said, I have one of my team members that just does statement analysis, another one that does voice stress analysis, and I do the behavioral analysis. It's a 3-pronged test. And in the 3-pronged test, when you're evaluating truthfulness, when a person is not being truthful, you'll be able to see it in all channels of communication. You'll be able to see it in their language. You'll be able to hear it in their, not necessarily hear it in their voice, but it'll pick up vocal tremors, stressors. And then you'll also see it physiologically leak out through their body language or facial expressions. So that's what we did, 3 different states, and we all did it together, and we do this all the time. So
at this point, I was completely done. God did not want me on this earth anymore. So we lived on a 3-story building. I told my sister goodbye, and I walked to the roof. So my mom finds me up on the roof, says, she will love me again if I will just change, because my sister had tattled on me. My mom's up there, she'll love me again if I'll just change, which is not the thing to say to a person standing on the edge of a building. At this point, I'm a logical person again, and it shines through. This is only 3 stories, and if I don't die, this is going to hurt worse than the others. So I run back into my mom's arms saying, you know what? I'm changed. It's done. It worked. Epiphany from God. The pain finally stopped.
Was he being truthful or not? Because the bottom line is, if this were happening, we really need to fix this. Because what we don't want to do is to have anyone be tortured for any reason whatsoever.
I think the worst part about conversion therapy is the lie that it provides to the parents. My parents were sold snake oil, telling them that they could change their child into an all-American boy. And in the end, conversion therapy nearly killed me and destroyed my relationship with my family.
So we put it to the test. So the first thing that we did is I analyzed, keep in mind that the stack's this big. I mean, I sent them over to the Institute, but there's no way in 15 minutes I could go through this all at one time. So the main thing is that he said that he went to a therapist. At first, he said that he had went to a doctor, and it changed then to a therapist. He talked about the location where it was at. He also talked about that the government was trying to kill him, and they were killing people around him. He had heat and coils put on his hands. His hands were tied down with blocks of ice and then poked also too with needles.
A lot of people ask, what in the world does your gender fluid identity have to do with nuclear waste? And I will respond with, I am given the opportunity to serve my country as I am. And that's a really important aspect of my work, because I work on nuclear waste management, where transparency and honesty and trust building are so critical.
He was electrocuted. He had shock therapy, and he talked about the abuse from his dad and also a suicide attempt.
Together, that what I was doing was coming out. My father didn't take that very well. He would become extremely physically abusive, and I would actually wake up in the emergency room because I'd been punched so hard. My mother would step in at some point and say that, like, hitting Sam isn't working. We need to do something more scientific. And that was when we found conversion therapy.
My name is Sam Brinton, and I serve as head of advocacy and government affairs for the Trevor Project. I've been an advocate for ending conversion therapy for a very long time now, and state after state after state after state are signing these laws as late as this week, right? Like, we are truly watching a watershed moment where the power of politics is no longer being used to hurt me, but to help me. I am proud to have just gotten married a few weeks ago. The greatest screw you to conversion therapy known to mankind.
Here's Sam Brinton. So Sam Brinton, this is the very first one here I want to show you. You can see him kind of smirking and smiling here, where he's talking about where he went to the conversion therapy site. Now, why is this important? It's because we want to know, did this really happen? So I'm looking at his behavior when he's talking about it. So when you see his facial expressions, I'm looking at expressions that are contrary to the emotion. So when he's talking about the therapy site, he's smiling when he's doing that. That's what we call duping delight. Duping delight is when a person feels really good about duping you. They think they did a great job. So there's a physiological response that says, hey, I'm just going to pat myself on the back and I did a really good job. And they tend to emote this sense of joy, this smirk or smile that comes out.
So we told you about a Tanzanian fashion designer who was watching Fox News coverage of Sam Brinton. That would be Joe Biden's non-binary cross-dressing nuclear waste expert who stole luggage off carousels as part of his fetish. So this designer, Asiya Alkag, noticed that Sam Brinton was wearing one of her dresses. And we thought, how great would it be to track down this Tanzanian designer to tell her story? And we have. She joins us now with her husband, Kamsin. Asiya, thank you so much. Kamsin, thank you. Asiya, will you tell us what happened? How did you notice that it was your dress?
Bismillah. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
Of course.
My name is Asiya Idarus Kamsin, Tanzanian fashion designer based in Houston, Texas. On February 2018, I flew back from Tanzania with my collection of Lady in Red Fashion Show 2018, which is my annual platform. I was invited in Washington, D.C. to Kenyan community event who really support my work to showcase my designs. I flew from Houston to Washington, D.C. on March 9th, 2018, when I arrived in DCA, one of my bags was missing. I opened the claim to Delta office and DCA, and I made a police report in DCA airport, but my bag was not found. On December 2022, we saw on the Fox News about Sam Brinton luggage issue, and saw my custom-made designs word by Sam Brinton, which was in the missing bag back 2018. Oh my God, I was shocked. For more than 40 years, I work hard. On my work, it's very paining. Then I made another police report in Houston. They told me to wait for investigation. On January, somebody called me and introduced himself, and he told me he's working on my issue, but still today I had nothing. I was asking myself how this person got my custom-made designs, because it's one of a kind, and wear them without fear and display in public.
A Fox News alert: airline passengers can breathe easy because the man behind the most infamous airline heist since D.B. Cooper has been brought to justice. That's right, Sticky Sammy is in handcuffs again. And no, it's not the fuzzy kind. Biden's non-binary former nuke guru and convicted bag snatcher was arrested last night at his Maryland home and charged with grand larceny. Police picked him up for being a, quote, fugitive from justice. So wait, does that make him a gender outlaw? We'll have to see what box he checks. Sticky appeared before a judge today who refused to release him, instead extraditing him to Virginia. The investigation is being led by Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, which means this is about what went down at Reagan National in D.C., remember? That's right. Sticky stole an African fashion designer's bag, and then he wore her clothes over and over and over again. So we reached out to the fashion designer, and she said the police have been in contact with her lawyer. And she's been asked to come and identify the items taken by the cops, so it certainly looks like Sticky Sammy robbed this lady.
He was brazen enough to wear those outfits from that African designer. And the only thing they didn't find was the underwear, because my contention, having worked with perpetrators, is that he masturbated in that and got rid of that. So you listen to his story that has been videotaped, and it's very elaborate. It's very detailed about the torture he went through, that his parents took him to these anti-conversion therapists, but he can't remember the name of the therapist, but he can remember details and being electroshock, being subject to that, and ice baths and hot water and all sorts of these aversive techniques, behavioral techniques. But what you're saying, Ed, is that you really went to the furthest extent to try to make sure that those that were contributing to the study were legitimate.
Yeah. Yes, and look, we did give them the opportunity to give pseudonyms so that their actual names were hidden, because this is a group who, if you want to talk about oppressed people who leave their LGBT lifestyle really are very oppressed, because the LGBT activists are really quite aggressive with these people. But what we have is we have all their contact details, we have their names, and we can prove who these people are. So they're not statistics or things that we just made up. The Latrobe study that we talked about, the very first one, has cherry-picked stories and to show the horror of conversion therapy. One of them beggars belief. It talks about a woman who claims that her dad abducted her, took her to some sort of clinic. She was put in an ice bath. She was put on a table. She had electrodes tied to her labia. She was given electrical shocks. There was a priest, apparently, or a pastor, who walked around quoting Bible texts, walked around the table. And the bottom line is all those things are illegal. You know, it's not like it's conversion therapy. It's a crime to kidnap somebody. It's a crime to put electrodes on a woman's labia, to have her naked and zap her. But there's no ever story about who went to court on this.
That's exactly right.
Why was no one charged? You know, why didn't this person become before the courts? Why were they forced to pay compensation? Nothing. And then you've got to say, well, hang on a sec. How realistic is this story? You know, we need evidence that this is actually truthful. And my reading of it is that I would be very doubtful of the accuracy. The other thing with this particular woman is she talks about at 17 years of age of having been in a psychiatric centre, and then you go, whoa, hang on. So we have a psychiatric patient giving a story that sounds like they're having some sort of delusional episode, and this is taken as evidence to justify conversion therapy legislation. Is there a problem with this? I would think so.
Sorry, your wealth of knowledge. This study is intensive, and it's intended to, and that's why we want people to go visit the website, freetochange.org, to be able to download not just the entire booklet in PDF form, or you can order it as well, but also access the stats, so that if somebody listening to this is in a country where this kind of legislation is being considered, you can give this definitive study, this reliable and valid study, to your lawmaker, because the other side is rushing in with these shoddy studies that look very convincing because they have a lot of these personal stories. Because we think that no one would fabricate being tortured. Yeah. And so they play upon lawmakers' emotions when in reality, there's no way to verify that has happened. But those same people that are trying to push to the forefront, these people that have these elaborate stories of electroshock therapy and all sorts of things, they will poo-poo the lived experiences of people that actually were unduly influenced into an alternative lifestyle, into the trans lifestyle, and decided that it wasn't for them. Or when they talk about how they were fast-tracked and they were given a letter of recommendation or a referral letter in one sitting.
How many of you feel that you were blindly affirmed?
I didn't get enough pushback on transitioning. I went for 2 appointments, and after the second one, I had my letter to go get on cross-sex hormones.
2 visits? That's it?
And the therapist that I found only required 1 therapy session in order for her to be comfortable writing this letter for me.
The therapist that I got, she actually told me that she could get me all the paperwork that I needed to transition that after my first session.
But I mean, of course, hindsight, because back when I wanted to take hormones, I thought Planned Parenthood, oh my God, this is like a godsend. I don't have to go, because I didn't want to talk to a therapist. So I don't have to jump through any hoops. I don't have to do anything. I just walked in and got it.
I wanted to find ways of dealing with my gender issues that aren't medically transitioning, and those ways weren't presented to me. The only solution that was presented was chopping your breasts off, injecting yourself with hormones, and becoming a man.
And so those same people that will put forth these horror stories that will say we have to believe them because they're based upon somebody's lived experience and nobody would lie. But when these detransitioners talk about how they were manipulated and nobody helped them think through this decision, suddenly those opposing voices will say, well, they're lying or they're exaggerating. So isn't it interesting that we're supposed to believe a smaller cohort that have these very elaborate experiences, supposedly, but can't provide proof or detail and haven't pushed criminal charges, but they will minimize now the people that, for instance, are the victims, the survivors, in my estimation, that are on the Reddit website, 50,000 of them saying they weren't given accurate information, and therefore, according to the study and our position would be, they need to be able to be free to reconsider and make a change.
Look, we had 3 states in Victoria or in Australia so far put this legislation through. We didn't have the study ready till the 3rd state, which was Victoria. In the first 2 states, being Queensland and the Australian Capital Territory, the Latrobe study was very much in the debates in our Houses of Parliament, being waved around and being read from and quoted. And when the Free to Change study came out, our politicians here, the ones that are supporting us, took that in and started quoting from it. The Latrobe study wasn't mentioned anymore at all, because they suddenly realised that if they're going to start quoting from that study, the Free to Change study would pop up and say, well, hang on a sec, what we're showing is this. So they went very quiet about that. The other thing is, we estimate that the Free to Change study has now been downloaded around about 40,000 times around the world. And yet you will not see it referred to anywhere at all in the LGBT groups. They do not want to draw attention to this. If they thought they could tear the study to pieces, they'd be all over it, pointing out all the errors and all the mistakes and the reasons why it's no good. We have seen nothing anywhere at all criticising it anywhere. And we think that that's probably a good tick to say that we've achieved a goal with this.
So we will also, on our site, we'll have the link to this so people can go on, they can download this as well, or they can peruse it. So you have, through this study, and again, I was privileged to contribute Chapter 5, all that to say there's doctors, as a matter of fact, share with people who contributed, because what you have handed people now, whether people going to school boards or going to lawmakers, you've provided parents and other concerned citizens with an actual bona fide study that counters these false narratives.
Yeah. So we had Professor John Whitehall, who's been a paediatrician for over 50 years. He's been very active, particularly in the whole gender dysphoria area. And on the Stop Safe Schools side, he did a number of short videos for us that you can watch, and you can download the transcription as well, where he talks about the whole process, the physiological process and the mental process of kids going through all this. We had Dr. Con Cafetaras. He's a medical doctor. He's an activist in this area, and he was one of the main ones very responsible for the questions within the study. We also have yourself, John. Really appreciate that. David Pickup from America. David runs one of the largest, I think they call it the regenerative, or one of the clinics for people who want to leave their LGBT lifestyles. And I think David makes a very clear point here. He says, we don't say to people, okay, you're gay or whatever else, we're going to work with that. What they do is they work with people to work through the issues in their lives that have caused problems. And if you look on the website, and his name just skips me for a moment, there's one particular guy there, and he was a activist in England, very much for the gay lobby, very, very active. And he says the same thing. He went for counselling about unrelated issues, and he found that his gay attractions started disappearing. And that's what Dr. David Pickup also says. We don't target people and say, oh, you're gay, this is terrible, we need to fix it. We have people come to us who have internal needs that they need to be addressing, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's bad parenting, whether it's drug addiction, whatever else it is. And they find that these gay attractions, which have arisen to fill a particular need in their lives, start reducing, because that need is being reduced by the fact that the underlying issues are addressed. And I think that's really important for people to realise. So when these people go for counselling, they're not trying to be converted. They're trying to get their lives back together so they can live healthy, happy lives. That's what they want. And that's what our governments are banning and stopping people from doing. That is, in my mind, a crime. I don't know how politicians can live with themselves putting this sort of stuff through, and yet they do, and endlessly.
And that's really crucial, once again, for us to reiterate that we are not converting people. We are advocating for people to be able to reevaluate, for people to be able to reconsider, for people to be able to be free to change, free to choose. And we say that only nefarious individuals, only cult leaders, manipulators, groomers, predators would want to limit that. Brad, I know that's the concern up there in Canada as well.
100% it is. We've got our own troubles, but they're very similar to Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and it's coming to the US. We're all put under this this situation of, well, threats. It's a continual threat for us, whether you're in Australia or whether you're in Canada. A threat of speaking and providing options other than what the government seems to want everyone to push. There's just no way out of this. We have to somehow change our legislation because it's now become a law here in Canada. And that is where it takes a lot to change a law. It doesn't take a lot to make a law. It takes a lot to change a law. And, I think that every country that's in the shape that Canada is in, whether it's Australia or New Zealand or the UK, and soon to be the US, we have got a judicial system in all of those countries that needs serious attention, no different than our own governments, our political leaders, our own government has been infiltrated by the World Economic Forum. And that, along with the World Health Organization and and the other oligarchs that are part of this all. It's troubling and it's concerning, and they keep forcing multiple issues upon us. But let's take care of our kids first and foremost. Let's take care of the women and the children and make sure that they can't grasp those, well, not those, how about the future of humanity? With that, this is Unmasking the Trans Movement. I want to thank everybody for being here today. There's still more to unpack with all of this. We don't give up here. We don't quit. We don't stop. We say things that other people won't talk about, and we do that for a reason and a purpose. It's to educate and provide you with the knowledge and the information to move forward as this evil ideology continues to knock at all of our doors. I'm Brad Wilder on behalf of John Uhler and Ed Sparrius. Thank you very much for being here today, gentlemen. Till next time, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. I'll see you soon.